As bizarre as this one may sound, I still think that this could actually work. So as we all know by now that Sony is trying to make their own Spider-Man shared universe. And although they're starting up with Venom as well as Black Cat and Silver Sable, I think that they're moving in a completely wrong direction. Because all these mentioned characters are very associated within Peter Parker's history. And recently I did make a video on why I think that Sony should just go ahead and make a Spider-Man 2099 film. Because when you really think about it, not only does Miguel O'Hara doesn't have to rely on Peter Parker and his history, but also having a superhero film based in a very distant future is something that we haven't seen yet. And people really seem to enjoy and agreed with my opinions on as to why Sony should just flat out make a Spider-Man 2099 film. And so I thought to myself, what if Sony decides to sort of plant the seeds in making a Spider-Verse film that everyone seems to really want? And a fan favourite Spider who could really hold his own film is of course Spider-Man Noir. And in this video I'm going to go over as to why I personally think that Spider-Man Noir deserves his own film. So for starters, Spider-Man Noir is its own thing and it has nothing to do with the mainstream Spider-Man universe. Therefore, you don't have to worry about any of Spider-Man's history and you could just play around with the noir setting. And why I think the noir setting in particular would be awesome for a Spider-Man film is because not only is this new and fresh, but it's also a more grounded and gritty take on Peter Parker. And effectively, you could have Spider-Man Noir to be an R-rated film. And although Spider-Man Noir is Peter Parker still, this version of Peter Parker is completely different in comparison to the Peter Parker that we all know and love. This Peter Parker is more down on his luck, he's more depressed, and above all else he doesn't really care about killing people, at least initially anyway. So although in the noir version of Spider-Man, where it follows the similar story beats to the original, this is based around the same time as the Great Depression, this version of Peter Parker is not like the original, and even the supporting cast as well as some of his villains are completely different. Now, although I'm not the biggest expert when it comes down to the Spider-Man Noir storyline, I do know that it does follow the similar story beats to the original where Uncle Ben does die and Peter Parker has to learn that with great power comes great responsibility. And I know it's very jarring to constantly see Uncle Ben die over and over and over again. I do recommend that if they want to differentiate themselves from the original Spider-Man, I do feel like that they should tweak the origin for Spider-Man Noir a little bit, but at the same time be respectful to the source material. At the end of the day, Spider-Man Noir is technically an adaptation of the original Spider-Man source material. And of course the Spider-Man Noir series had to do some changes to separate itself from the original. So for example, instead of having Uncle Ben die, have Uncle Ben be imprisoned because of how corrupt the police really are in this universe, and have Aunt May die instead. And this could explain as to why Peter Parker in this universe is more relentless. And then near the end of the film, have this version of Felicia Hardy be the one to school Peter Parker with the moral of with great power comes great responsibility. This may be a little different from the original source material, but at the same time it is respectful and it does follow the similar story beats. And as I mentioned earlier, Spider-Man Noir does have its own take on different villains as well. Some of these villains haven't even made it onto the big screen yet, such as Kraven, Chameleon and the Enforcers. And because of how crowded Spider-Man Noir really is as a storyline, I feel like that this could be broken down into 3 films. So for the first film, I would have this version of the Vulture as the main villain. And don't worry, he is completely different to the MCU's Vulture, because this version of Adrian Toomes is a carnivore as well as being the killer of Uncle Ben, or in my version, Aunt May. And have Spider-Man Noir have this little revenge storyline between him and the Vulture. But at the end of the film, not only does he decide not to kill the Vulture just so that he could become the bigger man, but also discover that there's a lot more than meets the eye. And I would have the Vulture be working for Hammerhead this whole time, making Hammerhead the villain for the sequel alongside the Enforcers. And alongside Hammerhead, I would also have Kraven the Hunter and Chameleon as side villains as well. And after Spider-Man Noir beats Hammerhead and the Enforcers, it is revealed that Hammerhead and the Enforcers are nothing more but goons and that there is someone else who is in the hierarchy. And as we know in the comics, Norman Osborn in this version is of course the leader of the Enforcers. And at this point everyone is sick to death of seeing the Green Goblin in every single version of Spider-Man there is, so I would switch the Goblin's role slightly, and instead of having the Green Goblin, I would replace him with Tombstone. Because just like the noir version of Norman Osborn, Tombstone is the type of character who controls crime. Not to mention that Tombstone is yet another one of Spider-Man's villains who we haven't even seen yet. And to top it all off, Tombstone would feel right at home within the Noir universe. And ultimately, if you're going to take some liberties within the origin story for Spider-Man Noir and tweak bits here and there, I think that Spider-Man Noir could hold his own film, if not his very own trilogy. Now, I did mention earlier that Spider-Man Noir could plant the seeds for the inevitable Spider-Verse film alongside Spider-Man 2099, and honestly, I feel like there are several other Spider characters who could hold their own films. But I'm gonna try something a little different and leave it up to you guys on who I should talk about next. And I'm gonna open up a poll. So would you like me to tackle on a Spider-Gwen movie next? I mean, sure, she's a little overused at this point, but I feel like she could hold her own film, and I think it could actually work. Or would you prefer for me to take on the Scarlet Spider film, and how I would personally tackle the spin-off film? Which would be admittedly very tricky because Scarlet Spider is very intertwined with Peter Parker considering that he is a clone, but I feel like Kane specifically could actually work, if done correctly. Or hell, do you even want me to talk about a Spider-Ham film? I'm not even joking, I feel like having Spider-Ham as an animated movie for kids would actually be interesting. Or if there's another Spider character that I haven't mentioned yet, please comment below on which Spider character that you'd want me to talk about next, or how I would think that they could actually work in their own films. Just remember, vote in the poll, and whoever gets the most votes I will talk about next. So I'm gonna finish this video right here, and as always, thank you guys for watching this video, please like and subscribe, take care and have a good one.